I felt my legs go numb, my heart raging in my chest, my cheeks scalding. I needed a few seconds before I found the strength to get out of bed, to drag myself to the bathroom, followed by nothing but my shame. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it. I had had an erotic dream about a stranger. It was inconceivable, simply absurd. It was at that moment that I felt a twinge in my lower abdomen. I brought one hand to the level of my uterus and gasped as I dragged myself to the toilet. I pulled down my briefs and realized. My period had come, my hormones were in turmoil, and my messy head was a victim of biological imperatives to which I could do nothing but succumb. I felt debilitated, almost sick. It was as if my body was completely pervaded by a fever that no virus or bacteria had caused, and thus was virtually impossible to eradicate. Once I had rinsed myself and put on a tampon, I went straight back to bed and lay under the sheets until almost 10 o'clock. It was hunger that drove me downstairs, through the living room to the kitchen. There was no one in the house. It was rich, that silence that hovered within the walls when I was the only person inhabiting them. My parents were at work and wouldn't be home until after dinner. My father, being a taxi driver, was almost always busy with rides. My mother, on the other hand, worked as a teacher in an elementary school, but since her colleague Susan had become pregnant, she had agreed to cover her role at the after-school club. As for Jacob, on the other hand, he was a middle schooler. He was obviously in class at that time. I heated a cup of milk in the microwave, then added a teaspoon of instant coffee and some sweetener. I drank standing by the kitchen window. I watched the driveway stretch out under my gaze, the green grass hugging the house, the mailman pedaling hard up the hill to deliver the day's mail. The neighbor's dog barked as soon as the man approached with a newspaper in his hands. I hid my laughter behind the cup. I wished I could have been like Charlie, a chihuahua 2 apples or so tall, but with courage to spare. I would never have challenged something that was at least 10 times taller than me. It was a credit to him, trying every time, even if the enemy he was hurling himself at was a peaceful big man with a perpetually reddened potato nose. When I had finished my meager breakfast, I rinsed my cup and then stretched my arms upward to stretch. I needed a good shower to pull myself together. I spent half an hour under the boiling water, humming the most famous songs from Britney Spears' repertoire. Then, with steam still saturating the room, I stood in front of the fogged mirror and cleaned it as best I could with the sleeve of my robe. My favorite time of the day had arrived, that of skincare. I had a differentiated routine for the morning and evening and was always very strict about it, not so much out of stubbornness, but because as soon as I stopped, almost always just out of forgetfulness, my cheeks would get covered with annoying pimples. I came out of the bathroom with skin as smooth as velvet. Since spending the entire morning hunched over books was out of the question, I got dressed. I would take advantage of that day away from the university to go grocery shopping. Supermarkets were one of my comfort zones, after all. Short denim shorts, a white top, my hair tied in a low ponytail. The wavy locks fell neatly down my back, except for 2 that contoured my face. I didn't wear makeup, but before leaving the house, I put on an ever-present layer of cocoa butter. Without that, it was impossible for me to do anything. Lips had to be well moisturized before leaving the house. Woe betide the opposite. The store I usually went to was close enough for me to walk there. Being morning and a weekday, there was hardly anyone in there. I walked through the aisles and thought about what I wanted to eat for lunch and snack. I took a loaf of tofu, some spring onion, some soy sauce, peanut butter, and tahina sauce. I put everything back in the basket I was lugging around, then went to the beverage section and grabbed a small bottle of Diet Coke. I gave a mental review to the recipe I wanted to make, and determining that I didn't need anything else, I headed for the checkout counter to pay. There was only one open, and in front of me, a lady was passing on the scrolling belt a flood of cat food. As I waited my turn, my gaze was lost above the display. She was selling a slew of condom boxes of different shapes, sizes, and flavors. That object, as indispensable as it was sinful, brought me back in my imagination to the dream of that night. Ian had not worn it when he had grabbed me by holding me against his shoulders. "Miss?" I shook my head, waking up from my thoughts. "Excuse me," I said to the cashier. I hadn't noticed at all that it was my turn. I hurried to empty the cart, and the woman took to knocking each item. When she told me the total, I pulled my iPhone out of my shorts pocket. Card, I exclaimed, and a moment later I put my phone down on the reader and waited for the ding to confirm payment. Only once outside did I realize that I had not taken anything to snack on. Patience. I was going to tap into the bottomless well of junk food Jacob was getting from Mom. When I got home again, it was 15 minutes to 12. I marinated the tofu while nervously biting my lower lip. But who was I kidding? I was trying to live my day normally, but it was clear that my heart and head were caught upstairs in the bedroom. The tofu wouldn't be ready for at least half an hour, I thought. I decided to get it over with and remove that torment. I climbed the steps 2 by 2 and threw open the door to my room. The computer lay on the floor, turned off. I lifted it up, opened the monitor, and pressed the power button, but only the red low battery icon flashed and then went off again. I sighed in annoyance and looked for the charger in the desk drawer. As usual, it had ended up swamped with 1,000 other junk items that I punctually promised to throw away, but always ended up staying there. I plugged in the computer, gave it a few moments to recover, and then hit the power button again. This time, the fan started giving me the signal I was waiting for. It was turning on. The loading wheel seemed to take forever to hurry up. But had it always been so slow? Or was it me who could no longer contain my impatience? I typed in the password, trivially, my date of birth followed by a smiley face, and pressed enter. Another brief loading, and I was finally in. The desktop was a mess of icons, documents, forgotten photos, failed downloads, and programs used once and then left there to rot. Amidst that mess of shapes and colors, I spotted the browser icon. This time, I did not need to Google the website, because I had memorized it. I quickly typed the letters one after the other. The page flashed before my eyes. Then the lettering, the colors, the pictures began to appear. I typed Ian's name into the search bar, moved the pointer to his profile. A minute later, I was confirming the payment with my PayPal app on my phone. Yes, it's really me. Yes, I'm sure I want to pay. Yes, I am confirming the purchase. The process seemed endless to me. The green confirmation symbol made me feel empty, as if my courage had leaked away completely. I blinked a few times, then took a deep breath. I had done it. I had paid. Neither of us had moved a sono step closer to the other, yet it seemed to me that the distance between Ian and me had already shortened dramatically. I found out that to talk to the prisoners, I had to download an app on my cell phone and enter a code that now appeared on my screen. That was a unique code that connected me and the prisoner. Through that app, I could text the prisoner as many times as I wanted, but he would only reply to me during the times allowed by the prison, which were the only times he was allowed to use the computer. Before I could start the chat, I had to confirm and agree to a slew of conditions. Most were questions about my intentions. It almost seemed as if they suspected me of being a delinquent myself, but I couldn't blame the motive too much. It was almost logical that some miscreant might want to get in touch with a detained accomplice. In this regard, I learned that all conversations were being monitored. Today, my message would be read by a third person, whom neither I nor Ian knew. It was disturbing, but those were the rules, and I clicked the confirm button to accept them. The code appeared on my computer screen, large, blue, bold letters, 508842. I opened the app on my phone and entered each digit carefully, then confirmed the input and waited for the chat to load. A conversation actually opened. At the top it said, JK Ian 0 98525, and there was a roundel in which the inmate was supposed to put his picture, but in his case it was blank and contained only a preset gray little man. I pressed in the type bar, then started typing. I typed at least 1,000 things, but erased them all. Hi, I'm Clara. I live in Tallahassee, and I thought, Hi, Ian. I'm Clara. I saw your profile and, Hi, you have a peculiar name. How do you pronounce it? Hi, you are handsome as sin, and speaking of sin. I threw the phone against the mattress and pressed my hands to my face. If I had gotten too mental pair, I would have ended up just not texting him anything, and since I had paid it, was definitely out of the question. Stressed and determined, I decided to keep it short. Without further hesitation, I typed, Hello, and pressed send. I don't know exactly what I was expecting. Something inside me believed that I would get an instant reply, that I would see the 3 typing dots flashing in the lower left corner of the screen. It didn't. I stayed staring at the display for a good 5 minutes, torturing my fingers, tugging at them out of nervousness, but Ian did not answer. I scanned the cell phone to the side and lay back, sinking my face against the pillow. I felt like a fool. I probably was, and texting a prisoner was only one of many reasons I could have stated that with absolute firmness. The timer on the cell phone rang. The tofu had finished its marinating. I dragged myself out of bed like a zombie, shoved the cell phone into the back pocket of my jeans, and dragged myself downstairs. I pulled the tofu out of the container where I had marinated it with soy, ginger, and hot sauce. At that point, I cut it into finger-thick slices, breaded it in cornstarch, and in another bowl mixed equal parts miso, tahina sauce, and peanut butter. Once a creamy mixture is obtained, I dipped in tofu and finally cossied it in a pot over high heat. Once it was ready, I arranged it on a plate and started eating on the couch, armed with chopsticks and with the Spanish telenovelas playing in the background. I watched it without subtitles, but even if it had been dubbed in English, I certainly would not have understood a word of it. It was about 14 o'clock when I received a text notification. Half asleep on the couch, I jumped up as if someone had pricked me with a pin. My hands ran to my pockets. I kicked out my cell phone with my heart in my throat. I unlocked the phone and read, "You have a new message from Christina Abbott." I stood dumbfounded for a while. My world of dreams and disappointments had just shattered. The message said, "Everything confirmed for Friday night?" Right, that stupid party. No matter how incessantly everyone talked about it, I kept forgetting about it. Those kinds of events had completely lost their appeal for me for several years now. As a 16-year-old, I used to go into a frenzy at the mere idea of being in an adult-free house with rivers of booze and blaring techno music. But now that the adults were us, and there was nothing really forbidden, those parties had become the equivalent of a big headache for me. And I couldn't even handle alcohol that well anymore anyway. I used to be able to get drunk without any consequences, whereas now, one too many glasses of wine was enough to wake me up in the middle of the night with tachycardia. Sure enough, I wouldn't miss it for the world. It was very fortunate that by message it was not easy to perceive sarcasm. Christina sure didn't perceive it, since she responded by reacting with a smiley face surrounded by floating hearts. I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. The four walls of my room seemed oppressive, as if they were shrinking more with every minute that passed without Ian responding to me. I had no idea what the prison hours were, had no idea when he would respond, or if he did. I felt like I was going crazy. I had never smoked a cigarette in my life, and I found myself with the desire to smoke a whole pack, one after another. I went back and forth in my room, sending vowels to Melissa in which I vented. "Okay, prison hours, but it's 9 o'clock at night." How is it possible I didn't check my messages? I feel like a fool. I knew it would be a bad idea. You should have stopped me. Why do I listen to you? I was about to record yet another desperate message when the cell phone vibrated in my hands, and this time it was not Christina Abbott, nor Melissa, nor Mom, nor Jacob. It was the prison in Tallahassee. It was Ian. "Hello, stranger." My heart stopped in my chest.